You don't stop expecting people to show up because they disappointed you. You stop expecting them because your brain quietly rewires itself to survive without certainty. At first, it feels like strength, like maturity, like emotional independence, but it isn't what most people think it is. It's not confidence, it's not peace, it's adaptation. And adaptation always leaves a trace. Your nervous system is designed to predict patterns, not just physical patterns, but emotional ones. Who responds, who disappears, who follows through, who doesn't. Every time someone fails to show up when your brain expected them to, it registers a prediction error. And prediction errors are not neutral. They are processed as potential threats. Because from your brain's perspective, unpredictability has always been dangerous. Stability meant survival. Uncertainty meant risk. So your brain starts doing something subtle. It doesn't confront the person. It doesn't force change. It adjusts the expectation. Because lowering expectation reduces prediction error, and reducing prediction error reduces emotional pain. This process is called predictive regulation. Your brain would rather expect nothing and be right than expect something and be hurt again. At first, this adjustment feels like wisdom. You tell yourself you're becoming realistic. You stop assuming people will follow through. You stop relying on promises. You stop needing confirmation. And on the surface, this looks like emotional growth. But underneath, something more precise is happening. Your reward circuitry is recalibrating. The anticipation of emotional reliability begins to shut down. This is where it gets interesting. Because the brain doesn't distinguish between expectations that are unrealistic and expectations that are unmet. It only measures prediction accuracy. Over time, your nervous system learns that expecting consistency produces more pain than expecting absence, so it shifts toward emotional minimalism. It stops investing energy into anticipation, not because anticipation is wrong, but because anticipation has become neurologically expensive. There is a concept in neuroscience called learned irrelevance. It describes what happens when the brain stops assigning importance to stimuli that once mattered. Originally studied in attention systems, it explains why you stop noticing things that no longer produce reliable outcomes. But it also applies to people. When someone repeatedly fails to produce consistent emotional responses, your nervous system gradually categorizes their presence as irrelevant to your stability. You don't consciously decide this. It happens automatically, quietly. The emotional weight they once carried begins to dissolve. Not dramatically, not all at once, but incrementally, like a signal fading into static. At some point, you notice you're no longer disappointed, and that feels like progress, because disappointment used to hurt. Now it doesn't. Now you expect less. Now nothing surprises you. But what you're actually experiencing isn't emotional resilience, it's emotional prediction shutdown. Your threat detection system has learned that hope creates vulnerability, and vulnerability creates instability, so it removes hope from the equation. Not completely, just enough to keep you regulated. This is the part most people misunderstand. They think becoming unaffected means becoming stronger, but often it means becoming less open to prediction entirely, less invested, less engaged, less exposed. Your nervous system is not trying to make you cold, it's trying to make you safe. Imagine your nervous system as an internal forecasting machine. Every interaction is a weather prediction. At first, when someone enters your life, your brain predicts sunshine, warmth, consistency, reliability. But when storms keep appearing without warning, the forecasting system stops predicting sunshine. Not because sunshine is impossible, but because predicting storms prevents shock. Eventually, the forecast just says nothing. No prediction, no expectation, no emotional preparation. And in that silence, something important disappears. Anticipation is one of the primary drivers of emotional vitality. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter most associated with motivation and emotional engagement, is not released when you receive something. It is released when you expect something. Research in reward prediction has shown that dopamine spikes strongest during anticipation, not outcome. Which means when your brain stops expecting people to show up, it also stops generating the chemical signals that create emotional aliveness around connection. You don't just stop expecting people, you stop feeling the emotional momentum that comes from believing they might. This changes how you move through relationships. You respond slower, you invest less, you reveal less, not intentionally, but because your nervous system has learned that emotional neutrality is safer than emotional investment. And here's the moment most people never acknowledge. You start confusing the absence of anxiety with the presence of peace. They are not the same thing. Anxiety disappears when the brain stops anticipating uncertainty, but peace comes from trusting stability. These are neurologically different states. One is defensive, the other is secure. When your brain stops expecting people to show up, it isn't always because you found peace. Sometimes it's because you've stopped allowing your nervous system to hope for consistency at all. This creates a quiet shift in identity. You become the person who doesn't need anyone, the person who doesn't wait, the person who isn't surprised. And this identity feels powerful because it protects you from the emotional volatility you once experienced. But protection always has a cost. When your brain stops expecting emotional reliability, it also stops fully recognizing it when it appears, because recognition depends on prediction. The brain detects patterns by comparing reality to expectation. Without expectation, there is nothing to compare. So consistency can exist in front of you without triggering the emotional response it normally would. This is how people become disconnected without realizing it. Not because others stopped showing up, but because their brain stopped expecting anyone to. The pattern that once protected you begins to limit your ability to experience stability when it finally becomes available. Your nervous system becomes like a door with a highly sensitive alarm system. It was designed to prevent intrusions, but over time it became so sensitive that it stopped opening easily at all. And here is the psychological cost most people never see. When you stop expecting people to show up, you also stop revealing the parts of yourself that only exist in response to reliability. Certain emotional states require safety to emerge: trust, spontaneity, emotional openness. These are not traits you activate alone. They are states your nervous system permits when stability is predicted. Without prediction of stability, those states remain suppressed. You become efficient, functional, controlled, but less emotionally expressed. And the most dangerous part is that this feels normal, because adaptation always feels normal once it stabilizes. But there is a difference between not needing people and no longer allowing yourself to expect consistency from them. One is autonomy, the other is protective detachment. Your brain is trying to protect the version of you that once felt destabilized by unpredictability. It is preserving identity coherence, preventing the emotional fragmentation that comes from repeated expectation violations. But protection is not the same as resolution. Your nervous system does not heal by eliminating expectation. It heals by experiencing reliable prediction again, by slowly allowing expectation to exist without being punished for it. This doesn't happen through force, it happens through exposure. Small, consistent confirmations that prediction and reality can align again. And when that alignment begins to return, something subtle changes. Not immediately, not dramatically, but gradually, your nervous system begins restoring its capacity to anticipate without triggering threat. You start noticing consistency again, not because you forced yourself to trust, but because your brain allowed itself to predict stability without defensive correction. This is the moment emotional vitality returns, not as excitement, not as dependence, but as quiet openness. The ability to expect without fear.
The day your brain stops expecting people to show up is not the day you became stronger. It's the day your nervous system chose certainty over possibility. And while that choice protected you, it also limited the range of emotional experience available to you. But the brain remains plastic. Prediction systems can update. Threat responses can recalibrate. Expectation can return when stability proves itself consistently enough to be believed again. Not everyone will show up. Your brain learned that for a reason. But the deeper truth is that your nervous system never stopped wanting prediction to feel safe again. It only paused expectation to protect you from instability. And sometimes the most important shift isn't forcing yourself to expect more. It's recognizing that the part of you that stopped expecting was never weakness. It was intelligence. It was adaptation. It was survival. And once you see that clearly, you stop mistaking emotional absence for emotional strength. You